The following program contains graphic material, including offensive language. Viewer discretion is advised.
Science fiction, the great teacher, the great inspiration. It helps us see the endless possibilities of life. So let's be inspired together.
Come with me if you want to live.
We are all explorers, driven to know what's on the horizon, what's beyond our own shores.
We are not sending out interceptors. We have taken them completely by surprise.
Hey everybody, it's Jeff. Hope everybody's doing great. Nice day here today in Maine. Sunny, beautiful weekend. It's in the mid-70s. Can't ask for any better weather, for summer. I know we're going to get that heat wave at some point. It's coming. It's a-coming. I do hate the heat and the humidity, though. Anyway, I wanted to talk about Star Trek Strange New Worlds, the episode 10, which I believe is the final episode of their first season. So, if you haven't seen it, spoiler alert here, okay? Personally, I don't give a shit if somebody spoils anything for me when I hear about a movie or a TV show because, I don't know, I just don't care. In fact, I think in some ways I kind of like the idea because then there, I don't have to worry about surprises when I'm watching something to distract me from, the story. I know what's coming and I can focus on the little things, focus on those little things that I like so much. The things that other people would never bother to think about or look at. So, reactions. It was better than the previous episode before that about the Gorns. Okay? And I like how they took the TOS episode, Balance of Terra, and kind of gave a different perspective about that story. It's sort of like playing the episode all over again, but from a different point of view, and with a few added things in there that weren't there before. Okay. Now, the one thing that I didn't like about the episode, which for me was kind of annoying, was them actually using a lot of the same lines that was in the original episode, Balance of Terra. In some ways, I don't think people would say things quite the same way if they were in a different circumstance, talking to a different person. You know what I'm saying? It just, maybe something that's similar but not exactly the same. I don't know. I mean, I feel like they deliberately just put these lines in there to harken back to the episode, which I found distracting. I think that, maybe a few lines here and there might have been enough, but they seem to do that a lot in that episode, which I found pretty annoying. Okay. Let me start with the Romulan ship. I like how they redesigned the bridge on the Romulan ship. It actually looks like a control center and not a closet. Okay. Okay. The way they did it originally with TOS is it looked like they took a wardrobe room and just retrofitted it into a set, for the Romulans, and it looked so cheesy, it was ridiculous. Even for the time, they could have done better than that, okay? I really hated it. But what I missed was, you know, all the annoying sand and beams that would come down from the ceiling whenever they would take a hit. You know, they didn't have that, so they didn't bother with that. But I thought, you know, shit, they should have done that just the same anyway. But no, I guess not. We ain't that lucky. And we get to actually see the view screen on the Romulan bridge this time, because they never showed it at all on TOS, the Romulan view screen. We had an idea where it was, we just never actually saw it. But we get the chance to see it. So I thought that was pretty neat. Okay. And at least they didn't change the Romulan ship that much. They kept to the way it looked. You know, it might have had just a slightly different hull color, but the overall design of it was the same. Let's see. Yeah, and then we finally get to see what those outposts look like that were along the border. We never got a chance to see that except as a graphic on, you know, on a map that they showed on the screen on the bridge in TOS. But they were just like little triangles. They weren't really showing exactly what these things look like. But we got a chance this time to actually see one of these outposts. Now we know what they meant, you know, when they talk about how they are a mile deep in solid iron. Okay, I just think that it's kind of fortunate for them that they had an asteroid belt near the neutral zone, that they could take these big rocks and you know, basically put bases on them, you know, and space them so far apart. You know what I'm saying? Doesn't it seem a little weird that there just happened to be an asteroid belt that sits right along that neutral zone, and they were able to push these huge friggin' rocks into exact positions that you saw on the screen in TOS. You know, it's like, well, you know, it would probably take, you know, a few starships to be able to pull that off. Okay, you know, moving those rocks is almost the same as trying to move our moon with one, you know, you know, so I felt like, you know, how did they do that? You know, it's like, how were they able to do that? You know, that's a big undertaking to establish a neutral zone. You know, something like a project like that would have taken years to complete. You know, moving all those rocks everywhere to line up exactly on the line, as it were, and they're all made out of asteroids. Okay, because as you could see in TOS, it's really hard to stop an asteroid or even change its course. You know, when they tried to save that planet that was populated by what looked to be Native Americans. Remember, they had to try to stop that, and it took everything they had and then some, and then it didn't even work, you know. So yeah, that was an interesting thing. I mean, it was nice to see the things, but then that question came to mind. It's like, well, Christ, if all those bases are like that big, how in the hell did they move all those things in exact positions along the border? You know? Oh well. So we had that, and then we get to see the Farragut, which kind of surprised me, because I thought the Farragut all these years was just another Constitution class starship, but apparently it's not. It looks like more of a scout ship or a you know, a freighter or something. I always figured that the Farragut, which was one of Kirk's postings before he became captain, was, you know, on a Connie, as, you know, Trek fans like to call it. So it was interesting to see that. And, you know, Kirk, I'm glad the actor didn't try to make an imitation of William Shatner's acting as Captain Kirk. Okay, I'm glad they didn't do that, because that would have been very annoying. It was bad enough watching Shatner act that way when he was on the TV show, but to have somebody else try to rip off the same mannerisms and shit, no. But the guy, I guess, who played him, he did pretty good. You know, I think he did a pretty good job for Captain Kirk. All right. I'm surprised, you know, when he did the Future Pike, when he showed up wearing the uniform from the Wrath of Khan, which well, actually, it wasn't exactly the uniform from the Wrath of Khan. If you look at the uniform closely, there are some subtle differences between the Wrath of Khan uniform and the one he was wearing. So, I guess you could say that the future he's from isn't exactly like the future that we see Kirk and Spock in the Wrath of Khan. But I thought they could have aged Pike a little more than they did, because, you know, you figure that was quite a few years after where Pike is, Captain Pike is in the timeline. You know, you're looking at about, what, 20 years or more. So, you know, I'm surprised they didn't age him a little more than they did. So, I don't know. I guess maybe it was too much work to try to do the two of them together. So, it just felt like it should have been a little more. He should have looked a little more aged at that time. Remember, Kirk was a young man when he took command of the Enterprise. Okay, and he was considered the youngest captain in Starfleet because of his, you know, his intelligence and his aggressiveness to achieve the ranks, as it were, to become captain of a starship, which was his dream, you know. So Pike was always a little older than Kirk, so he should have looked a lot older than in the future. But they got that Klingon time thing from Discovery. That's something that they carried over from Discovery, which I think is bullshit, because that looks like something they ripped off from Doctor Who. And I think I can't remember the name of the episode on Doctor Who that had these time crystals, but they were there, and I know that's where they got that from. So I wish they'd have found a different way to introduce older Pike into the future, as it were, or into the past rather. I'm sorry, to bring future Pike into the past, than using those, you know, weird time crystals. I mean, you know, if the Klingons had things like that, don't you think they would have used them to subdue the Federation, like go back into a distant past before the Federation was even around, and just scuttle the whole fucking thing? You know, come on. You give a superpower that kind of an advantage over you, they're going to use it, okay? Especially if they're losing in a war, you know. But they, you know, that, like I said, it didn't make sense in Discovery. It still doesn't make sense now when they use it again. So I really was kind of disappointed that they used that stupid mannerism to bring Pike into the past. I wish they didn't do it. You know, I think it would have been better if he'd have just came back into the past using a starship, using the slingshot maneuver or some fucking thing. You know, that would have been a more. But that would have been a better, more appropriate Star Trek method, because they've done it before, okay? And so anyway, that's what they did for that. Una getting arrested at the end was obviously designed to keep people riveted for season 2. All right. Of course, I saw that coming. You know, when they was talking about how she was genetically modified, or whatever you want to call it, from a different species. And of course, Starfleet is going to look at that as a possible threat or something. And if it ever got out, and of course Pike made no bones about it, you know, he was going to report it, and he says if they have trouble with it, they can come to me about it. So as soon as they found out about it, I knew they were going to come after her, okay? I didn't think it would happen at the end of the season, but I knew they were going to come. I think there was going to be an episode where they were going to have to deal with that. So henceforth, they went ahead and did it. Okay. So that sets up for season 2. You know, they kind of wrote themselves into that. You know, if you think about it, making her an alien or whatever, okay, instead of just staying with her as a human, you know, they open themselves up to something that, you know, the fans are going to expect. And they couldn't just say, oh, okay, that she's genetically modified and we just move on from here and forget about it. No. Not in the world of Star Trek. When you start a premise with something, you got to follow it through, because there's a lesson to be learned there. And, you know, we're going to find out, hopefully a well-written episode concerning Una, where we're going to find out something about humanity and Starfleet in the 23rd century. And, you know, considering how tough they were on Dr. Bashir in the 24th century, how they imprisoned his parents for what they did to him, you know, I can only imagine how stiff the penalty is going to be in the 23rd century, you know, as a result. You know, I mean, the only problem is that it does add a what do you call it, a marker in the timeline of Star Trek that somebody in the 23rd century was, you know, it was ousted basically, and they were arrested. You know, it was never mentioned before in any of the Star Trek episodes that there were any in the history of Starfleet that were arrested or caught or whatever. You know what I'm saying? So Dr. Bashir was really the first character we got to see, you know, who was genetically modified and working in Starfleet. Okay. But now they want to show us somebody who had already done that and is going to be arrested in the 23rd century. And I'm saying, well, if that happened, then how come it was never mentioned before in either of them episodes, you know, where they had that topic up there, you know? So anyway, they set the stage for that. Let's see here, what else? The Romulans, they changed the uniform just a little bit, you know, from TOS, but you know, it doesn't look that bad really. You know, they just added some extra glittery pins and stuff on the sash they wear, and, you know, and some stuff. But they forgot the helmet that the bridge crew wore. Remember, they wore helmets. They forgot about that. So they didn't have that in there, included in that. And the Borg I got the Borg on the line. I got the Romulan fleet just appearing the way it did with all the cloaking devices. I was like, okay. Well, no, they kind of warped in. So we know that they say that that Romulan warbird had a warp drive, and the reason why, you know, in TOS we never saw them use it is because they explained in this episode that it was damaged somehow. Their warp drive was damaged, so they didn't use it. Okay. And so, you know, it goes back to that statement that Scotty made in Balance of Terror. Then what did he mean by saying their power is simple impulse? You know, what did he mean by that when he said that? I mean, it, obviously, because impulse is used as a word to label a motive of travel that's less than the speed of light. Okay. So if they're saying that the power is simple impulse, are they trying to say that, you know, maybe the scans of that Romulan ship in TOS were inaccurate? Okay, that the computer didn't have an idea of what it was, but it just picked something closest to it. Because, you know, in Next Generation, we find out that they use a quantum singularity in the warbirds that they have, right? Okay, and we know the Federation or Starfleet uses warp drive and matter antimatter power, and they used it for a long time. And so, can we assume that a quantum singularity was what was powering the Romulan warbird in TOS, and the ship's sensors on the Enterprise kind of read it as an impulse drive or something, you know? I don't know. They didn't know so much about it. I mean, the cloaking device was something new, even though Spock theorized how it would work. Okay? And like you said, the power consumption would be enormous, okay? But the only way the power consumption wouldn't be that bad is if they had some form of powerful core in order to power it. But then the Romulan captain on that ship had said that their fuel was low. So Then he goes, now we're talking about fuel. What, it runs on fossil fuels now? I mean, I thought it was I thought it was impulse drive, and then the Romulan commander says that their fuel is low. So what the hell is he talking about? So, it's one of them stories from TOS where the writers didn't know where to take it. They didn't know how to describe anything about the Romulan ship, and they were just pissing in the wind, as it were, or actually throwing shit on the wall to see what would stick. And as you know, everybody knows anything about science says it would take more than just simple fossil fuels to be able to travel anywhere in space, because the power to get anywhere would be more than simple fuel could ever produce. So you'd have to have a new form of energy source to be able to accomplish that, and it has to be infinite. Okay? It has to be an infinite power source, otherwise the ship would just run out of whatever the hell they're using, and they'd be stranded. So you got two theories they threw at you in Balance of Terror: fuel and impulse. Okay, which, like I said, gets more confusing as the series, and as you move into the other series after that goes on. They never really elaborate on that, but we find out that a quantum singularity is what they use to power their ship. So I guess you could say whatever the hell power source they had in TOS and Balance of Terror, they were able to achieve warp drive. So it would stand to reason, okay? They could, if they only could do was go to impulse power, then none of those people would have ever survived as far as they did getting to the neutral zone. It would have taken them forever to get there, okay? So they had to have some kind of means of faster than light travel. I had an idea that I saw in a book that was written back in the 80s, where they had a carrier, a Romulan carrier that looks shaped like a V, and had two great big warp nacelles on either side, and they would carry these birds of prey to certain sectors of their empire to simply patrol it, okay? And that way they wouldn't have to go and chase anything down. They would just have ships everywhere, okay, where there's really no escape. I mean, if you destroy one ship in one sector and you're trying to get to another, you're going to have to fight all over again with another one. So it was sort of a stopgap measure that it's really interesting, but you'd have to produce a great deal of number of those ships, which means the space would be cluttered on the Romulan side of the galaxy of these Romulan warbirds. But since they're small and they look like they were easy to produce, they could produce them in mass, sort of like the Dominion was producing all their fighters so much quicker than Starfleet, because their ships were basic. They didn't have luxuries, they didn't have much of anything inside. They were just fighting things. That's all they were, carrying weapons. And that's kind of like the Romulan warbird was like. It's just a ship that carries weaponry and has a minimal crew to operate it. And they're out there for maybe a few months at a time, and then they're picked up and brought back, and the crew is rotated for a different mission, okay? In the meantime, the Tal Shiar, which we know exists even then, could basically, have their own fleet of ships where they sort of keep an eye on the other birds of prey out there. Who knows? Remember, it is a dictatorial kind of empire with the Senate, though. Let's go.
doesn't matter what comes, fresh goes better in life. With Mentos fresh and full of life, nothing gets to you. Staying fresh, staying cool. With Mentos fresh and full of life, fresh goes better. Mentos freshness. Fresh goes better with Mentos fresh and full of life.
Mentos, the fresh.
Ginny Thomas.
I want to talk about Ginny Thomas.
Ginny Thomas.
Ginny Thomas.
Ginny Thomas.
Ginny Thomas.
Ginny Thomas.
Ginny damn Thomas.
The committee has now extended an invitation to Ginny Thomas.
Ginny Thomas told the Daily Caller that she looks forward to, quote, clearing up any misconceptions.
She says she wants to cooperate.
She will happily testify.
She has said that she is willing to come in and testify voluntarily. We're glad to hear that.
Why are you protecting her, Liz Cheney?
Be a part of the entertainment value of a lifetime.
I loved it.
It was the best performance I've seen in a lifetime.
I loved the show. I liked it very much. He's a very entertaining man. It's well worth the money.
Now appearing in Charlottetown, coming to Halifax November 6th to the 18th, and St. John November 20th through the 26th.
Okay, everybody, welcome back. Finding up on there in that last segment, I get carried away when I start theorizing about things in science fiction. But about that episode, I'm glad that it was nice to kind of revisit an episode of TOS, okay? And like I said, it's kind of nice to see a what-if scenario played out in that story. Like, what if it went this way, and how would it have ended up? As you can see, it was a pivotal moment in the timeline of Star Trek, because, like he said, the Romulans were testing Starfleet's mettle. They wanted to find out if they were a threat still to them, and if not, that was a signal that it's time to go and invade. Okay, that's how they reason things out. Because an empire that doesn't expand is an empire that collapses. All right? And so they don't want to be caught by surprise by some measure of a superior force. They need to know what's going on. And so, that's kind of what the Romulans were doing. But there was a point made, I think Dr. Mabenga had made, about how, if you want to talk about declaring war because of an incident, just attacking the outposts along the border was a signal for war right there, Certainly not responding to what they were doing would have been considered weak, as Spock said, because they are, a militant race, the Romulans. And so for Starfleet not to respond to the destruction of those 3 outposts along the border, which, like I said, they should have, that would be a declaration of war. I mean, what if somebody in another country here in the United States, or here on Earth, what if another country just sunk 3 of our battleships at sea? Okay, would that not be considered an act of war? Because that's kind of like Pearl Harbor, right? That's what happened at Pearl Harbor. We were just sitting there, and Japan sent aircraft carriers with planes, and they were told to go out there and destroy the that ship area, where all those battleships were docked. Okay, we didn't respond by sending out one ship and taking on Japan to prevent a war. The war was already begun by the simple act of aggression that they did to us at Pearl Harbor. So the very idea that Kurt was trying to prevent a war by starting a fight never really kind of registered quite right to me. It seemed to me like the first thing that you should have done was say to Starfleet, we know who did this, send your fleet. Okay, and Starfleet should have sent everything they had to the neutral zone, okay, with the Enterprise waiting there to rendezvous with them. That would have been the better, more logical course of action to take, but instead Kirk decides to respond by destroying the Romulan ship. But at that time, it seems to me like the war had already begun, because they kill people. So the fact that the Romulans didn't send any more ships after they did what they did doesn't seem to be a logical action for them to take. And I know they're Romulans, but they are connected to the Vulcans, which means they have high reasoning ability. So why would they not expect an all-out war from the other side if, by destroying those outposts? What made them think the Federation or Starfleet would not react by sending everything they had into Romulan space and just taking out everything? That brings up that question there. I mean, certainly Kirk by himself out there fighting it out with that Romulan. I mean, the whole galaxy hangs in the balance, and they're just gonna let that happen with just 2 ships out there fighting it out. I mean, come on. That's the one thing I liked about Babylon 5, is when situations like that would happen, they dealt with it in a manner in which you would, imagine it like today or in contemporary times. How would we react to that? I mean, I understand Starfleet is supposed to have a, sort of a more developed system, but when it comes to fighting, in wars and stuff like that, there is no system that's superior. It's all about destroying other people's things, okay, and the best way to do it with the least amount of casualties, okay. So at the end of the day, if somebody strikes first, you're going to want to make sure you give them a hell of a bloody nose, or at least you take them out, so that never happens again. So it's a wonder the Romulans, didn't start an all-out war in the Alpha Quadrant by doing what they did. Just because they lost one ship in a battle with another starship that was way over, was way overclassed to that Romulan ship. I mean, the Enterprise it had way more weaponry than the Romulan ship did, and a lot more power, so it was way overclassed. But because they lost their one ship and didn't do anything more about it, doesn't seem like, well, that doesn't sound right. I mean, I think Starfleet would have done a lot more than that. They would have sent in the fleet. They would have had, they'd have demanded some explanation or whatnot. You know what I'm saying? There would have been more stuff going on about that. Because you got to think about it, a lot of those Romulans, because they lived to be like 200 years old, some of the Romulans in that fleet were probably in the original Romulan Earth War, for Christ's sake, Think about it. Because the Romulan Earth War happened, a little after the timeline of Enterprise, Star Trek Enterprise. So, for a Romulan, that's not that far down the road. If they were a soldier then, they'd be commanders now, in the 23rd century. So a lot of them would probably still be around. They would remember those days. And hell, an opportunity for an old warhorse to pick up the baton, as it were, and continue the fight is so tempting and irresistible. You know, remember the Battle of Sharon, the one that the Romulans said was the greatest embarrassment, you know, during that war? And, you know, who was Admiral Jarrock was telling that to Picard. The Romulans never really recovered from that, which was part of that Earth-Romulan war. That was one of the final battles, I think, where the Romulans actually lost. Okay, and it decided the fate of the outcome of that war. So if they were bitching about it all the way into the 24th century, you know that in the 23rd century, you know, the Romulans' feelings were still hurt from that war and carrying a grudge. So they would have loved to start something. So if they sent in that Romulan warship and destroyed all those outposts along the border, to me that would have been like a necessary, you know, a deliberate strike just to stir the ship back up again, just to start another war. We're going to take out their outposts, and that'll be like us screaming we're coming back for another round. Okay, it didn't make any sense that just because they lost one ship in a fight with another Federation ship that they just simply would not show up. They had a huge fleet that showed up there at the border. Okay, and they looked like they were ready to go toe to toe with Starfleet right then and there. Okay, and of course the Enterprise, the Enterprise decided they were going to cut and run. They didn't have any ships there, so that right there was a sign of weakness, that that Starfleet wasn't even prepared for anything like that, because they didn't have enough ships near the neutral zone to route that fleet. So they would have lost a lot of area before Starfleet would have been able to respond. Okay, those outposts would have all been destroyed, and many sectors of the outer fringes of the Federation would have been lost right off in the initial fight. That would have been more than enough encouragement to the Romulan Empire to take that war to the next level. Okay, which, you know, is what happened in that future timeline, is that the Romulans saw the Federation as weak, because even though the Enterprise basically had fought out a draw with the other Romulan ship, they didn't think that Starfleet was really strong enough to repel a whole mass of ships. Okay, and even though Kirk tried to bluff them with all those automated ships that he had found, which to me is like, why would they have so many of those things floating around? You know, I don't know where you got that. But the idea that that he sent all that and it still didn't fool the Romulans at all in going at it from anyway, just shows that how eager they were to start things up again with the Federation. So that episode, Balance of Terror, and how it ended was really, you know, they were trying to make a point in that episode, and the point could only be made if it ended the way it did. If it ended with a war starting, then the point would have been lost, and, you know, I don't know. But, you know, just because Kirk was captain of the Enterprise then instead of Pike, to me doesn't seem to make much difference. Okay, because like I said, there was only, you know, two ways that could have ended anyway. I guess they had to, in that episode of Strange New Worlds, they had to kind of tell us a story that kind of injects a little bit of Pike's worry about how you can't really avoid what's coming. You know, you can't avoid the licking he's going to take, as it were. He's going to get hurt, and if he tries to deviate from what his destiny is, it could have repercussions that he never imagined. And he's just going to have to accept his fate, which is what I think how they should end the series, is basically when he has that accident there that gets him wounded, that, you know, by that time he would have known that this was the only way his life was gonna go, that was the path he had to take in order to make sure that other things didn't happen as a result of him trying to avoid his destiny. And destiny's a bitch, you know. It's like you know, you can't do nothing when you're dealing with time and all that, time travel and shit, and you go into the future, you know, and you see what, I mean, the thing about time travel is that you can go into the past, and when you come back to the future isn't where you left it. You can never get back to the future you left from when you go into the past. That's, you know, that was played out in Back to the Future. Okay, the future they returned to in the episode, in the movie, the third film, was not the future they left behind. Okay, he ends up in an alternate future where, you know, the family's doing better, and, you know, everything is better than for his, you know, for him. It's not the same. And so that future that the movie started on, the 1980 whatever that was that he was at, that 1980 is gone there, and it's been in his future. He's in a different 1980 or something, and that's where he's going to live. Because even the smallest change, you know, the further back in time you go, the smallest change can be a big change, you know. But if you go into the future, I think that, you know, if you return to where you left, that future, I mean, where you return to will be the same where you left, because you're not changing anything in that present. You're actually going into a future that you can't really say is set in stone, because many things can happen along the way. Okay, it's like what I was arguing about Discovery going into the future and them ending up in that future. Without Discovery staying where it was and having Discovery part of what was going on in the past, who knows how the future would have turned out. I mean, maybe the future in that, was it 32nd century? Maybe the 32nd century would look a little different, might be a bit different, if Discovery didn't show up in the future the way it did. Okay, but they can always go back to where they left, or at least, you know, go back to a point later in the Star Trek timeline and still be, you know, part of what will change the future. You know what I'm saying? Because like the cliche, the future is never set in stone. The future is what we make it, and that's very true. Nothing about the future is set in stone. Any action we take changes the future in many ways. I mean, today, if I left into the future today, okay, the future would be decided on at the moment I left to the time I arrive in the future. That would be a future, a possible future. It's never a certainty, but it's a possible future. Okay. If I left now, if I leave into the future an hour from now, let's say an hour later, I decide I'm going to jump into the future. That future is going to look a little bit different than the future I ended up in an hour before, because, like I said, the future is constantly changing as we live. You know, what's that Yoda say? The future is always in motion. That's true, because that's why it's hard to predict it, because at any given moment, the future that you see is going to be a little different than the one you're thinking of at the moment. Okay, it's always different. Like, let's say, you know, I put this hat on now and I go into the future. Well, now the future is that. Okay, now I go into the future without the hat on. Now the future looks a little different. You know what I'm saying? Just little things like that. Now imagine taking big things, like say, I take this truck and I crash it off the bridge, okay? And I'm not in it, of course, but I'll just say I push this thing off the bridge and into the interstate, okay? So it kills a lot of people, and then I jump into the future from that point. The future is going to be different. In fact, I'm going to be wanted for murder or something like that, okay? But if I go back in time and I don't take the truck and push it off into the interstate, kill all the people, well, then that future never happened, okay? The future is going to be different now, you see? So the future is always in motion. Our actions in the present dictate what our future is going to look like, okay, at any given moment, okay? But when it comes to going into the past, well, you go into the past, you're already going to alter where you left, okay? So you can never ever get back to where you left, because, you know, in order for you to get back where you left, you couldn't have left where you left in the first place. You know what I'm saying? If you didn't go back into the past, then you're still in the proper time period. But the second you did leave and you go back, well, that's gone. You obliterated that present for you. Okay, that's gone. That future doesn't exist anymore. So in Strange New Worlds, having Pike show up in the past to deliberately change it, so that way his younger self doesn't make the same mistake he made, was basically, an effort to say, well, we can change older Pike can change the present by going into the past and altering the past deliberately, and that's what he did. So, like I said, having that Klingon time crystal there, just so younger Pike was able to see what the kind of future was going to be through the actions, it was like, well, like I said, I didn't like that. They needed to find a better way to kind of explain that to Captain Pike. It needed to be a better way to that, but I don't know. That's the way they did it. All right. So anyway, enough said about that. So I will talk to you again at another time. Don't know when that'll be. I'm always doing videos, but often for the other show that I do. So please keep your ears open to local COVID-19 news. Obey whatever store signs are there that tells you if you need to wear a mask or not. It says they should have it posted on the door. Take care of yourselves and treat each other nice, okay? Because the reason why a lot of things in our world are so in upheaval right now is that I think people have never learned to just leave each other alone, and and stop bickering, stop finding flaws in everything that you see, because when you do that, you create tension. When you create tension, you create anger. When you create anger, you create enemies, and then after a while, they become fanatical enemies, okay? So we have to turn the fire down under the water so the water will stop boiling, okay? And you can do that just by biting your tongue and ignoring what pisses you off, okay? Just, don't make yourself pissed off so you do something stupid, okay? All right, so I'll talk to you guys later. Take care.
We are all explorers, driven to know what's over the horizon, what's beyond our own shores.
We are not sending out interceptors. We have taken them completely by surprise.
Because I think that the tradition of an engineer is a Scot, because all the great motor ships and the steamships of the world were built in the Clyde.